Hello, lovely people. I'm Sinead, and today we're going to make some jack-o'-lanterns for our dolls. So let's get over to that work table and get started. Here are some of the optional tools that you can use if you don't need to go and buy a bunch of clay tools to work with an air dry clay. This is my preferred air dry clay, but there are several brands out there. I am going to use just a butter knife from my silverware drawer. And you can also, I got clay stuck to it. You can also use an unused pencil eraser for smoothing, but you don't have to have it. One of the things that you probably should have, however, is a bowl with some water in it and something to mold over. So I've got some prescription bottles here that can be used, or you can use a piece of tubing but wrap it in plastic if you choose to use this, because you don't want the paper clay to stick to it. So this is a mold that you're gonna form your paper clay over, or your air dry clay, and you want to be able to remove it before it's dry, just so that it'll facilitate the drying better. Aluminum foil will help us to get a more rounded shape, and masking tape to help hold that foil on the pill bottle. Or I actually have some plastic tubing from bobbins for my sewing machine. I couldn't find it to have it sitting here, but that was originally what I was planning on using when my ex-husband said that I could have some of his prescription bottles. So taking the prescription bottle, you pull out some aluminum foil. Let's see if we're getting to the end of the roll here. Yeah, that's enough. It's really loud. Fold it up and kind of crunch it a little bit. So you don't want it flat, you want it kind of rounded. And you're going to put it around your container. Your container that you choose will decide what size jack-o'-lantern you're going to end up with. And then this foil is for the purposes of creating a round ball-like shape. So you kind of want to taper it into the bottle or plastic tube, or even cardboard tubing. Just kind of squish it in there. And if this end is not staying, or if you don't trust it, grab your masking tape, because you don't want it to pop loose while you're trying to form the clay over the top of it. So just put a little piece of tape over it so that it doesn't pop loose, and keep forming your piece of aluminum foil over, just trying to get a nice rounded shape. And I have dents in here I'm not worried about. You're just basically trying to keep from having too thick of walls on your pumpkin and still maintaining a more ball-like shape. So I'm going to try for a shorter pumpkin here. So I'm going to keep it closer to the bottom of the pill bottle. And we're going to set that aside because we have to roll out. Now you can use a rolling pin, a dowel tubing. This is what I'm going to use. It will leave the marks in the clay, but it's not actually that important. It still works out just fine. If your air dry clay has become somewhat dry, you can rehydrate it, as it were, by adding moisture and putting it in a Ziploc bag. You can work the moisture in by spritzing it, or just grabbing your bowl of water and rubbing some moisture on there and then working it in. So I'm going for a kind of elongated shape here initially. I have a lot of little divots appearing. Those can turn into cracks that are harder to work with. So you just kind of try and get your elongated shape more blended, I guess. And, oh, and you work on a clean, the only thing on here is paper clay. So a clean surface, it will pick up any fuzz or anything that is on the surface you're working on. So you want to be sure you're working on a clean area. You can put down a piece of parchment paper. I find that that can be really helpful because you can lift it up to peel off your clay. I've got a piece of silicone here. Piece of silicone, that sounded weird. It's a silicone crafting mat. And the other side has a lot of paint on it. So I don't want to use that side because I don't want paint in my clay. But I'm just getting this rolled out to approximately a 1/4 inch thick. Don't sweat it if you're a little bit thinner or a little bit thicker. You're just trying to get in that space of, it helps it to dry more evenly if you've got, and I'm feeling for high spots because invariably when I roll something out, there always is. Even when I'm baking, there's high spots. And yeah. So I am going to take my kitchen knife and give myself a straight edge there. Now, if you wanted to prepare your, make sure that your elongated shape was the right shape, you could measure around your bottle. You could get a distance around here and then know whether or not it was going to be long enough. I'm also going to cut off one end here. I just like having a more a straight edge to work with. It's not actually that necessary. Then, now this is probably going to be stuck to the surface. It's going to leave little bits of paper clay behind. I assume that other air dry clays behave the same. So there's little bits left behind. See me cleaning it up with the... so this side has more texture and will also have more folds that want to open up. So I'm going to roll that side against the foil. And this is a little taller. Here's your gauge on how tall. So I said I was going for a shorter pumpkin this time. And I need to shorten this in order to do that. So we're going to wrap this around, and where it meets up over here, I'm going to go ahead and cut that off. Just to bring this in to an easier to blend. And if it's not blending, get yourself some water and help it to blend together. A little bit of pressure, a little bit of blending. Then you're going to kind of start curving your edges in. I am pushing it in, whoops, without pushing that out. Just curving it around the foil, pressing on both sides. My strip is just, yeah, there we go. Just kind of press from both sides at the same time. It does really help. If you get to pressing too hard on one side, you'll actually stretch the clay and it will cause it to be really loose around your form, and that can be frustrating. So we now have basically a ball. And remember, your pumpkins are irregular. They can have warts. They can have all kinds of texture to their skins. So it's not imperative that you get this completely smooth. Smooth it out to where you're happy with it, but don't sweat the small stuff, as it were. Okay, so I'm going to set this down. Now, if I'd been smart, I'd have taken this lid off before I started. We're going to use this lid because it is so much bigger. If you don't have the lid, you just want to make sure that you're making this next piece bigger than the bottom of the pill bottle. So it needs to be bigger around than this. So we're using the lid as like a cookie cutter to give us the round shape to go by. And I've taken my scraps and I'm squishing them back together. Set that up there. I'm going to roll them out again. And I suppose if we get this rolled out enough, we can do both the top and the bottom. So you can make a stem end, the top, the cap for the jack-o'-lantern if you want. Plenty of jack-o'-lanterns out there don't have that. So I'm using this to just create a shape. Now, I did this earlier, and maybe it'll work again, where I actually used it as a cookie cutter. Okay, yeah, it worked. So that is a possibility. You could go that way, but if you've done it just to mark, you just take your knife and use your knife to cut away the excess. And and it's not important that it be perfectly round. It's just getting you an approximately correct size of disc. You're going to turn your pumpkin wrong side up, get your bottom even with the edges, put a little water around the edge. Then you're going to take this disc you just cut out and you're going to blend it in so that we have a bottom on our jack-o'-lantern. Again, this is not strictly necessary, but I like to have a bottom because if I decide to stick lights on the inside, there's a place to put those lights, and then I can easily pick up and move my jack-o'-lantern without leaving the lights behind, which is what happens when you don't put a bottom on it. You can use your back of your fingernail. You can use the front and do this, the side. You're just trying to get it to blend. Then apply some more water. Smooth that out, making a good connection between the sides and the bottom. Once you've got this all done, and if it's going to take you a while, you're going to be here because you want to spend a lot of time forming this. That's what's delightful to you, is to sit and form your clay and to just really get into the shape of what it is you're creating. Then you want to take this and lay a piece of plastic over it or slide it into a Ziploc bag so that it doesn't dry out while you're working on the bottom. I am going to set mine aside for right now. We'll come back to it. So this disc is going to be my lid. So I'm going to spend some time smoothing out these edges. Just a little bit. Mostly so it doesn't look like the inside of the pill bottle. And then, once I've got it fairly smooth, and again, I have never cut apart a jack-o'-lantern and not left it kind of jaggy, rumpled looking on the edges. I'm going to take this lid and I am going to use it to help me create that divot where the stem goes. And the easiest stem to make is to take a little bitty piece roll it into a ball. Put some water in the center there. Put that in. Of course, once you've added the water, which helps it to solidify onto the, to meld with it, it also makes it slippery. Now I'm going to take it off of here because I noticed that we were flexing too much. So I will squish this down. And you can use your knife and blend your edges. You can use your eraser if you have one to help blend those edges. If you've got clay tools, use them. You know, don't go the route of the kitchen knife if you've got clay tools. I'm just making it to where, you know, very demoing that it's not necessary. So once you have a little mound of clay blended in to your satisfaction, then you want to encourage that clay up into a stem. It doesn't even have to be that much of a stem, just a little bit. There. And then you can take, you know how the stem dries out? Okay, so that's not going to give me sharp enough points. The stem will always dry out at the end, and it has texture to it. And you know the best thing for creating that texture? I had to go look for it. The best thing is an old toothbrush. You hit that top with a toothbrush like so, and to me, it looks pretty much like the end of the dried out stem. If you want to continue to smooth out your pumpkin here, that's great. You are going to come back to this after you have created the ridges in your pumpkin. And again, here we are. We have lost a lot of our curve, and we're going to just take and push down gently to create the curve. And we're going to come back later, and we are going to add matching lines, that groove that goes into your pumpkin. You want to kind of help blend your lid into those grooves. So I'm just giving a little bit of a divot here, trying not to let the metal make lines. And there, I'm pretty happy with that. Again, I'm going to set it aside covered in plastic so that we don't have it drying out while we work on the other part. And I kind of wish I had brought in some cling wrap or something to lay over it, but I didn't. All right, so now we're going to start putting in the texture. Now, if you're wanting a little more smoothness to the sides of your pumpkin, be sure you do that with some water. Ooh, I think that's a really good place to start, right there. So I'm going to take the back of my knife, and I'm not pressing all the way through because that would be bad. Just want to create a little divot. And then I am going to kind of pull away from that divot, that line. There was clay on my knife. We can just blend that in. Using your fingers, the knife, the eraser end, you can create a pretty decent looking little crease in the side of your pumpkin. A lot of this is the same way when we make our redware pumpkins. I use a lot of the same methods. I'm, of course, using my clay tools because they are somewhat easier to use. I have some silicone ones that make this part easier. So, you know, if you want to get yourself some clay tools, if you're really into doing a lot, want to take up sculpting in air dry clay. It's well worth it to pick up some of those silicone end tools for shaping. And this is basically what you're going to do all the way around, creating as many of these little divots as feels comfortable to you, like it, to where it looks how you want your pumpkin to look. And after you've got that done, you're going to take that lid, remove your pill bottle or whatever it is that you were using, and you'll see that my foil is still in there. Leave that. Don't fight with the foil at this point. Then you're going to take your lid and you're going to set it on top, and you're going to take your knife and you're going to line up some little lines with the curves that you put in down below. Then, handling just the lid, you will smooth out and do the same exact action with the knife of pulling away from the divot and bringing it down, and to make it match up so that when it sits on here on your pumpkin, it has matching, which I've got the lid on wrong. Okay. We gotta stop and have me match up my lines. There we go. So that it has the continuation of the shape. If you want to do a little bit of, you know, shaping and more blending, you can. You can make this as exacting to your pumpkin as you want. Be careful, though, that you don't squish down on it too much in the process, because you could cause the pumpkin to split along the sides. Another thing is that when you take your pill bottle out of your pumpkin, you are likely to need to clean up the edge here, which just requires a little water and smoothing out around the edge. Once you've got your pumpkin to a state of pumpkinness in its appearance that you're happy with it, you will set it aside and let it dry, or with the without using, without leaving plastic inside it, like take the pill bottle out or take it off this lid, and I would actually make a support for the lid so that it maintains the dip, because if you set it down on that before it's dry, it will lose its curve. So you're going to take it and set it on a piece of foil, or leave it on here and just let it dry, or put it on the piece of foil and put it in your oven on the absolute lowest setting, so that the oven can help the clay dry out. You want to make sure that you keep an eye on this, and I personally use a toaster oven because my stove is a wood stove and it doesn't have a low setting. It's on or off and no middle grounds, no low grounds. So I use an electric toaster oven for this. And if your air dry clay has plastic or polymers of any kind in it, you'll want to do that in either outdoors or in a very well ventilated area, because it will off gas. My paper clay is just paper. It is paper and water. It does not have any polymers in it. So I would not be concerned about doing that indoors. But anyway, we need to let that dry. We are finally dry. It's when everything feels firm and you don't feel any moisture on the surface. We need to take out that foil now. So you can pull the foil away from the edge using your knife, and then get a pair of utility scissors in here and cut it. And maybe cut it in more than one place so that it so that you can get a chunk of it out of there. I don't know, this might actually come out all in one piece. Oh, look at that. It cooperated. So out in one piece. But you can cut it if it seems like it's getting caught. You don't want to strain this. Although once it's dry, it's pretty sturdy. But you don't want to pry and put pressure on the outside of the pumpkin trying to get the aluminum foil out. You want the aluminum foil to come out without straining the pumpkin. So now that we've got this dry and the aluminum foil is out, you can, at this point, if you want to, sand your pumpkin. Use 600 or 1,000 grit sandpaper to get a really shiny surface, or use 200 grit to take out features that you don't want. But don't sand it so far that you lose your design work that you put in, the divots on the sides that make it look like a pumpkin. You don't want to sand so much that you remove that. You also don't want to sand so much that you sand through. And there might be places on the inside that are thinner than others, you know, especially where that seam was. And you also want to check and see if you've got any cracks, if you've got any, like sometimes in the drawing process where you've created these divots, it'll crack there for whatever reason. And I think I have cracks where I put the pieces together. Yeah, there's cracks around where the bottom was put and where the two pieces were put together. So then that's all because I couldn't get in there and smooth it from the inside because the foil was in the way. One of the things you can do to stabilize that is to put glue in that crack and glue down in this crack. If any place, like I said, along where you've done your divots, cracks in the drawing process, put a little glue on there and try to get it down in without pulling apart the pumpkin. And use, make sure you use like a damp paper towel to take off the excess. Maybe apply your glue from the inside if the crack goes all the way through. And then just kind of hold it back together and maybe put a rubber band around it if it looks like it needs it. It will go back together and be just as sturdy as this one right here. So now after you've decided that the surface is how you want it, you're going to look around your pumpkin and say, ooh, that looks like a good face. And I'm looking at this one, and I'm really torn between this lumpy, more rounded side and this more flat side. It's probably easier to carve the flat side, but the rounded side has more of that pumpkin personality. I don't know. That's also, check the inside. If it looks like some area that you don't want to mess with, then don't put the face there. I think we're going to go for this area right here. The other thing that you might want to pay attention to is, like, even when you're carving on a real pumpkin, do you want the eyes to be across the creases, or do you want the nose to be across a crease? Because chances are you're not going to get the whole face within an area that doesn't have, without creases. That would look a little, well, it would look like a tiny face. It'd look like a very small face on a big head. So if that's the look you're looking for, then that's what you want to do. But we're going to draw our face on here with pencil. And I am probably going to end up cutting outside these lines. This is one of those areas where a craft knife, like an X-Acto, is the best tool. But if you don't have an X-Acto blade, which is, it's applied, that kind of knife is great for all kinds of different crafting. But say you don't have one. You can use a steak knife or a paring knife, but you will need to sharpen it after you're done. because it is going to dull it a little bit. You know what it's, have you ever cut into a delicata, or even, well, pumpkin skins aren't quite as tough, but there are several squash out there that are really tough. And you cut into those and it dulls your knife. So what I'm saying is that it's not going to be much different than that. So you can just decide. See, and I can see that my eyes are not exactly the same. They don't have to be. Joey did a redware one that part of its cute personality was the fact that its eyes did not match. And then you want to keep your mouth probably pretty simple. I'm going to try for one tooth. I may not succeed here. I'm willing to let that tooth go if I find that things aren't going well. But we're going to try. And that's what we want it to look like. So I'm going to go get my blade. So this is very much like carving a real pumpkin. You have set up where you want to cut. I'm hoping that you can see. And pressing straight in to get a nice clean cut. And I am starting in the center of the cut. Once I've got started, I kind of like that better than starting at the top of a cut. It leaves enough material behind to press against that's still attached so that you don't tear, which is the risk. Just like in cutting a real pumpkin, you risk tearing out. So, you know, just approach it the same way you would approach cutting up a real pumpkin. You may have to take away some material from the inside to get it to look cleaner, because you can see I've got bits of paper clay that are loose and hanging out there. You can also come back and use a file if you want to clean it up. I was trying to think, jeweler's files are really good for that. If you have a pumpkin carving kit, that little saw that it comes in a kit might be just the thing for getting some details in here. But I am going to continue in silence, I think. I think this eye is bigger. Well, it's not too much bigger. So with an electric stove for drying, it heats up your foil and actually helps to get it dry. But the disadvantage is that I did not end up using the electric stove, my little toaster. We don't have sufficient power out here off-grid to run all the electric appliances and whatnot that one would normally have access to. So a lot of times, especially as the weather changes and we don't have as much sunlight to charge with, it means that everything that we do with electrical power is done using a gas-powered generator. And gas prices are kind of steep. So we haven't been using as much power. And so it was actually cold and wet enough yesterday when I was trying to get these dry that I used the shelf above the wood stove, and I, paying closer attention this time around than maybe the last time I used it. Also, the last time I tried to dry something sitting it above the wood stove, the wood stove was on full time. It didn't have a, what do you call it, a time when it was shut down, where, if it's cold, you keep the fire going all day. So anyway, it was kind of a part-time fire, and I thought, well, it'll do. It'll help dry this out, and then I don't have to use the power. Well, it didn't heat up the aluminum foil, and so it took a lot longer. I can feel this flexing right here where the pieces get narrow. So I'm going to do more draw cutting rather than pressing. I'm afraid that is going to be the danger of losing the tooth. It's just like when you're cutting on a real pumpkin. You hit that area where you don't have as much material. You put too much pressure behind it and you break your tooth. Or you totally remove the division between the face, the mouth and the nose. So you want to be careful. So if you feel it flexing when you just press in for a cut, do like you would cutting through a piece of cardboard. Use several draw cuts and go at it that way. I'm also noticing that this is a little damp still on the inside. We're not as dry as I would like it to be, but we were good and firm, so I thought we were safe. And I haven't broken anything yet, so I guess we are okay. Anyway, as soon as we've got it cleaned up, it's time for paint. And I happen to have a paint that is marked pumpkin color, so I'm going to use that. But remember that you can paint your pumpkin any color. There are 0 limitations. You can paint your pumpkin rainbow if you want to. There's absolutely nothing stopping you. So at this point, it's time to go paint your pumpkin. One more thing before painting. If you're going to want to use a string of lights and your control is not going to fit on the inside with the lights, you can drill a hole in the back of your jack-o'-lantern to feed your string of lights through so that you can get the lights onto the inside and have the control on the outside. You can also use a battery-operated tea light if it fits, but don't use a real tea light. It will light on fire in here. And I don't think that needs to be mentioned, but I'm going to do it just in case. So, yeah, drill a hole for your lights. You could even have a string of full-size lights that you've got out for, lighting up along your table, and you want to put this on your table as part of the decorations, and you could just stick a single light into the pumpkin. But you have to drill that hole first, then paint. Well, here we are, all painted up and finished, and I used a little brown and green on the stem, and I really like how it turned out. I even painted the inside, which is totally not necessary. But the lid is not perfect, but it's fair, and I did not spend that much time trying to get it to fit at all. It might benefit from drying on it, but that means dry time would take longer. So that's up to you. If you've got a lot of time to wait for it to dry, then you might want to do that. Or you might want to just say, I don't need a lid. That's an option. So I hope you enjoyed this video and that you'll have fun making your own jack-o'-lantern, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.